I am honored to be here. Thank you so much for having me, inviting me here. You'll hear from the accent, yes, from Revere, Saugus area. It's so funny, when I travel around, people automatically know, I'm from the North Shore, and I'm Italian, so it comes out. So I'm thrilled to be here, thrilled to share my story. I live in Nashua, New Hampshire now. I went over the border. My parents still live here in Saugus, so I'm thrilled to come back. And we just recently moved all of our bags of hope supplies that you saw out there out of my parents' basement. So we're doing big things. I've been doing this work in the anti-trafficking movement about 12 years. And it all started when I realized I was a survivor of trafficking. Okay, so when we think about sex trafficking, when we think about human trafficking, generally we don't think it's something that happens here, right, in our neck of the woods, in our backyards. So because I don't necessarily know everybody in the audience, I don't know where you're coming from, I don't know if you know anything about sex trafficking or what you've seen on TV or movies, in the newspaper. So it's different than the entertainment industry, right? Like movies in Hollywood definitely make human trafficking look different than the reality of it. So I want to share my story in a way that raises awareness, gives you some hope, and helps you understand really from a survivor's perspective of what it's like to survive that lifestyle. Because really right now, right, I'm in my 40s, I look like a regular lady, right? I homeschool a few of my kids. I'm married, I have 5 kids altogether. I just got rid of my minivan a few months ago. So I've upgraded to not be driving a minivan. But right, I just look like a regular lady. I don't look like someone necessarily who was trafficked. And so that's the thing, is sex trafficking happens all day, every day, in our backyards, to our daughters, to our neighbors, to men and boys as well. But we're not recognizing it because it happens in plain sight. It's hidden in plain sight. So trafficking's also the very oldest profession, right? A lot of people say, oh, prostitution's the world's oldest profession. And we say, no, it's the world's oldest oppression against women and children. Because it's been happening forever, we just didn't have a name for it. And so in the year 2000, it finally became a federal law where you had to actually put a name to it. And so human trafficking, what does that mean? Well, you have to prove one of 3 elements if you're over the age of 18 and you want to prosecute: force, fraud, or coercion. And if you're under 18, you don't have to prove any of those elements because obviously you can't have sex with a minor. And the average age into the commercial sex trade is between 12 and 14. So you have to recognize that young girls and boys get into this lifestyle very young, but we don't recognize it, and then we see them as adults with all types of issues: substance use issues, homelessness, mental health issues, criminal records, this thick with felony charges, etc. But we have to recognize the whole story. And how it happens and why it happens is because it's based on vulnerabilities. And so what do you think are some vulnerabilities that young kids face every day, all day, even here in Saugus? Just tell me. Drugs? Yes, drugs all day long, right? That is definitely a vulnerability. But what else do you think is happening in the home, possibly, that makes kids vulnerable? Abuse, okay? Childhood sexual abuse is one of the #1 reasons why people get involved in the sex trade, because the dial has already been turned. 80 to 90% of women who end up in the sex trade later have been sexually abused as children, okay, because that dial's been turned. And what was so freely taken is now going to get paid for, somehow seems like an upgrade because of the prior abuse. Make sense? Is anyone aware of the ACE score, Adverse Childhood Experience? It's really important and it's good. And you could go home and Google it. You can take it for yourself. It's 10 questions. There's a lot of research backed behind it. 10 questions, and the higher your ACE score, the more at risk you are later in life for things like mental health issues, substance use, jails, domestic violence, etc. So the more abuse you experience as a kid sets you up later in your life for these types of things. Makes sense, right? And so what we experience as children obviously matters. So for me, right, grew up in Revere, big Italian Catholic family. I had one brother who was 10 years older than me. We had different fathers, and he did experience sexual abuse as a young kid. He was abused by a family member, but no one talked about it or knew about it. Everyone kind of just put their head in the sand kind of thing. But he always struggled internally, and those behaviors came out externally. You could see that in his lifestyle and the way he lived. And then my mother suffered severely with mental illness. And so you have to recognize that that is a major thing in the home. When you're experiencing between your parents, whether it's domestic violence, mental health issues, substance use, you are exposed to these types of things and you don't receive what you need. And so what is our number one need as humans? Love and belonging, right? And connection. And so my mom wasn't able to provide that care and that nurture because she wasn't able really to do that for herself. And then my father worked all the time to provide for the family, so he was never really around because he was out making a living. And then I did have grandparents who were very kind, very loving. They were my father's parents, and I'm Italian, right? So Nonni and Papa. And I'd sleep over on the weekends, and they'd cook Sunday dinner, macaroni and meatballs, and I call it gravy. Does anyone call it gravy? Okay, a couple of us, good. Even Anita on my team calls it sauce. I don't even know why she's hired. But anyway, right? So we'd cook macaroni and meatballs, and my Nonni would take me to church. She'd tuck me in at night, read me bedtime stories, just planted that seed of love and acceptance in there. And my papa would give me big hugs. You know, they were just very kind and loving people. And it just wasn't enough to like give me a ton of self-esteem and self-confidence, but at least those seeds were planted, right? Somebody loved me. Somebody showed me love. And then my mother's side of the family was totally crazy, great time, always fun, but they were completely dysfunctional, right? Lots of mental illness, criminal behaviors, drug addiction, alcoholism, etc. And that is where the disconnect would come in, because I essentially raised myself, right? No one was really paying attention. So when I was around 8 or 9, we moved to Saugus. My father built a house here, and I started struggling, 9 to 12 years old, academically, relationally, started spelling love, S-E-X, right? Because I didn't realize that's not what you were supposed to do. And if I wasn't giving it, the boys were taking it. So I did experience sexual violence as a teen, but what does that create? Shame. And do you understand that shame is the number one tool to keep us sick and unhealthy and hiding? And a lot of times in recovery, we say you're only as sick as your secrets, because it's true. The more we hide, the more we bury, the more choices that we make aren't necessarily healthy, because it becomes our identity. It's how we see the world through this lens that's all foggy because it's full of shame. Makes sense, right? And so I didn't want to go to Saugus High because I knew I'd just continue down this path of getting in fights and doing things I shouldn't have been doing and hanging out with the wrong crowd. And so I said, I need to get a job when I graduate at 18. So I went to the vocational high school in Wakefield. I became a hairdresser at 18, got my cosmetology license. I started going to North Shore Community College for journalism. I thought I'd move to New York and write for a fashion magazine and work at a fancy hair salon, right? I had dreams, I had goals, I was trying to figure it out. And don't you know, I was still drinking, partying, and doing things I shouldn't have been doing, and I was at the Palace nightclub, right? Okay, we remember the Palace. Even when I go far, like different, down like South Shore, people know, a few of them are like, yeah, I went there, right? And they like shamefully admit it. And I'm at the Palace, and I'm drinking and partying with my friends. And now that I think about it too, the way they did that, the men were over 21, and the girls were younger. And they just set it up that way. And of course I had a fake ID, and I was in there drinking, and I meet a guy who knows some of my friends, so he's not a complete stranger. You have to understand that trafficking happens through relationship. Yes, do women and victims get kidnapped and shoved in crates and kidnapped in the white creepy van with the creepy guy? Yes, that stuff does happen, but the majority of trafficking happens through relationship building. Do you know that familial trafficking is on the rise? How many women I work with whose parents are their traffickers? I work with a 33-year-old woman in a different state. Her father's been trafficking her since she was 10. And so when she was 10, he sent her to his partner's house, and they kept her there for a month or so and groomed her and trained her on how to do things and made her do horrific things at that young age. And she is still trapped. She works at a school during the day. She has a son. And every time they text or call her on the weekends or at night, she goes and does what she has to do. Is she handcuffed to a radiator? No. Is she stuffed in a crate? No. But where is the bondage? In the mind. Okay? It's almost like coming out of a cult. That's why you have to understand it is so invasive and so tricky, because this young girl has been groomed and exposed to violence, been made to do things that are criminal and violent. They've taken pictures of her, they blackmail her, and then the father likes to show up at the school when it's time for the son to perform in some kind of play or assembly, and he sits right there in the audience, just to remind her who's in control. Makes sense, right? It's in the mind. Familial trafficking is huge. How many women I work with today whose mothers were their first exploiters because the mother had a drug addiction, or she was poor. So she traded the daughter to get the needs met. And now these women are still trapped in the sex trade as older adults and realizing, oh my gosh, my mother first exploited me. No wonder why I was exposed to this, and no wonder why I think it's so normal, okay? Because the dial again gets turned. And so it's always through relationship. So are kids meeting their traffickers today at the mall, at nightclubs? And absolutely. But the number one place people are exposed to traffickers is on the internet. It's in their back pocket, right? It's through social media. It's so dangerous. When I think about when I've spoken at schools and girls as young as 6th graders, middle schoolers, know what OnlyFans is. And if you're not familiar with OnlyFans, you can thank COVID for, how the internet even bursted more than already was, right? We have Instagram, right? Where young girls are on social media and they're wanting to be influencers and they want all this attention and they're posting half naked or provocative pictures of themselves. And then OnlyFans comes along and says, hey, why don't you get an OnlyFans account? And now you can post those half naked and provocative or nude photos and have a following and have a base of subscribers that are going to pay you monthly for these photos. But the problem with this is it's insidious. And the men can text you directly and ask for different types of photos and more and more and more, and then ask to meet up if they're local, right? So it's just a slippery slope into the commercial sex trade, full-blown prostitution. And young girls are so duped by this that today they don't even necessarily need a trafficker. It's in their back pocket. Can you imagine the danger of how this is just so insidious and so in your face? And it's just been this slow, slippery slope of over-sexualization and of young girls and women. Like back in the day when I watched Pretty Woman, right? Remember, like, Julia Roberts was beautiful and the commercial sex trade looked empowering. And that's the problem too, is that people think, oh, it's her choice. She wants to do that and she can. No, no one makes the choice to necessarily be a prostitute. There is a small majority of women who call themselves sex workers. But I would love to have a conversation and ask, really, how do you lay your head on the pillow at night? Because no one tells you the flip side of the commercial sex trade, that it does deep, deep soul damage, because that's what it's designed to do. You are not designed, created, to have sex with strangers all day, every day, and be somebody different every single time. Every buyer wants something different and more disgusting and more unhumane and violent and dangerous. Like, that's not what we were designed to do. And in order to cope with this type of lifestyle, and it's inherently violent, we get addicted to drugs, or we're given drugs to keep us under the control. And we have tons of mental health issues because of the violence and the disgust that we experience. Does that sound like something people want to sign up for? Absolutely not. And so we're sold this lie and we believe it. I'll tell you, my 8 years in the commercial sex trade, Richard Gere never showed up in a Lamborghini and put a string of pearls around my neck. That is just not the truth. But that was the lie that I was sold. And then you think of music and entertainment, and today you got these women performers, on stage in front of millions of people, wrapping themselves around poles half naked. And these young girls are exposed to this, thinking that that's empowering. And then you have to think of pornography, speaking of the internet, and how insidious it is. And we hand our young kids devices and tablets, and they're on gaming apps and everything else, and they're beeping and bopping, and they're just going around the internet, and by accident, they're exposed to pornography. I know a sex therapist whose youngest client is 6. She's been exposed to porn since she was 2, and she thinks it's okay to have sex with anyone at any time because that's what she's been looking at, and it's completely normalized, right? And so remember back in the day, to find porn, you had to dig in the closet or under your brother's bed or your father's back, really dig for it. Or if you went into the corner store to purchase a magazine, I remember there being a black sheet or a trash bag over the dirty magazines. Now, right, I remember going food shopping with my son when he was little, and we're in the grocery store, and there's the Sports Illustrated, and the woman's essentially half naked, and he's like, boobs! And I'm like, yeah, that's right. Oh my gosh, what are we doing here? And I was just like, I can't hide this. This is a thing. It's in our faces. It's constant. And then you hand them the device, and it just takes off. Kids are exposed to porn today by the time they're 7 or 8 years old. They become addicted, and it becomes part of the brain, and it changes the brain just like a drug. And so you have to think about that. There wouldn't be any sex trafficking. There wouldn't be any demand if there wasn't such, there wouldn't be so much supply if there wasn't such a demand, right? It's basic business. And so unfortunately, it's the men, right, who are generally sex addicted, who have this sexual brokenness, and they're demanding more and more and younger and more devious things. And that's something that we have to talk about, because it's not another population. These men aren't men that are just like hidden away. You know, they're men with money, with prestige, lawyers, doctors, pastors. I can't tell you how many homes I went to, Wellesley, Lexington, Concord, how many homes I went to and the wife and kids weren't there, how many businesses I went to after hours, how many hotels in Boston, Copley Square, when the businessmen would come in from other places for business, right? This isn't another population. They're men in our communities, maybe in our places of work, churches, that have a sexual addiction, a sexual brokenness, and it has to be talked about. It has to be exposed. And porn, a lot of times, is that gateway. Okay, there's my spiel. There's my rant. I was on a soapbox there. Okay, back. I'm 18, 19. I'm at the palace. And I have no idea this is going to happen to me. I'm not educated. I have no idea about trafficking. It wasn't even a word back then. And I meet a guy who knows some friends. Again, he's not a stranger necessarily. And he brings me to the bar and he spends $7 and he buys me a drink. And I'm impressed, because that's all it took. And we exchange phone numbers and we get together a few days later, and he's dressed nice, he has cash, he's handsome, and he shows up in a champagne-colored Mercedes-Benz. Okay, I had never dated a guy like this. And so to have a trafficking situation, what do you need? You need a vulnerable person or a victim, a sex buyer, and then you need a trafficker. We're all coming out of this broken system. He was your typical story, raised in Boston, in a city, Dorchester, Roxbury, had no father, was kind of the breadwinner of the family. And he'd sold guns and drugs as a living, and he knew that selling women would be a lot more profitable and a lot less risky. And he's being taught the rules of the game by other older pimps and traffickers from the streets. And think about it, you get pulled over with a trunk full of cocaine, you obviously go to jail right away. But if you get pulled over with a woman in the car, it's a lot less obvious, and she's not going to raise her hand and say, help me, I'm a victim of sex trafficking. Right? Those words aren't going to come out of her mouth. And they know this, it's a lot more profitable. And so he was selling guns and drugs, and I would be his first one. And so he really played that boyfriend role. So he got me to love him and trust him. He would groom me, take me out to dinner, take me shopping, buy me things, and at the same time meet my family. He came over for Christmas and Thanksgiving. There's a family picture, you know, we're sitting in front of my mother's Christmas tree. He looks like the boyfriend. And at the same time, he's planting seeds of doubt in my mind. Why would you want to go to school for journalism? Why would you want to work at a hair salon? I know a way we can make a lot of money. You can own a hair salon. You can have a family and a business and a baby and whatever you want. I know a way we can make a lot of money. And here's the kicker, and this is what every trafficker says when they're grooming you. You're having sex anyways, you might as well get paid for it. And you start thinking, you're right, I might as well. And all of a sudden it turns into this woman's empowerment thing. Yeah, it's my body, I can do this, it's my choice, I'm going to make money off of that. And then all of a sudden, it's a false sense of power and a false sense of security, because you are not the one in control. It's the trafficker and the buyer, because he's got the money and your trafficker's waiting for you to come out of each call with a certain amount of money. And if you don't, you're going to pay for it. And no one tells you that. And so it's all good and glamorized. And so at this time, we're dating. He's planting these little seeds of doubt in my mind, making me think that my dreams and goals aren't good enough and that he has a better way. And he slowly starts to coerce me, and you can't see the coercion, you can't see manipulation. Never mind if you've been abused as a child, you're very much less likely to recognize that. And I happen to have a best friend who gets a new boyfriend, and I don't see her for a few weeks or a month or so. And I'm wondering what's going on with her. Don't you know I get invited to a party at Salem State University. I'm in the dorm. We're all drinking and partying. And they tell me that a stripper is going to come to be the entertainment. Okay, no red flags, no thinking twice about it. The girl walks in, she goes to take off her clothes and entertain us, and I realize it's my best friend. And I was shocked, and she was shocked, and we cry, ruin the party, and they kick us out. So I go back home to my boyfriend, and I tell him what happened, and don't you know, he happens to know her trafficker. He's connected to them. And he takes me to her house a few days later. Guess where she lives? Chestnut Hill. Nice, expensive, affluent area. Big home, beautiful, with fence around the home with a Range Rover and a BMW in the driveway. The neighbors have no idea this is considered this guy's stable. And he has all these women there that are prostituting in different parts of the state at any given time. And I come in, the home's big, he has his room, she has hers. The few other women that live there, she's calling her wife-in-laws. So I'm recognizing the language is even different. And they all share a room because there's so many of them. And she's saying, that's my man, and I go and I do these bachelor parties, and I work at a massage parlor, and I give him all my money, and he buys me whatever I want. And I go into a room, she has clothes, shoes, jewelry, Louis Vuitton bag, right? That was like the epitome of success. And she's not handcuffed to a radiator, she's not drugged. If anything, she looked good. And so this slowly starts to seal the deal, right, in my mind. I'm like, okay, maybe it's not that bad. So did I really make the choice based on the truth? Absolutely not, right? I was manipulated, I was coerced, I wasn't told the whole truth. And seeing like my friend was living the life kind of even made me believe the lie even more. And so I say, okay, I'll try. But if I don't want to do it, can I stop? Of course, if you don't want to do it, you don't have to. So I'm sent down to Connecticut to a massage parlor, essentially a brothel. Now, you're not going to see American massage parlors or brothels today because everything is online. Hotels, businesses, homes, etc. is where you'll find these women being exploited on the street. But today you're going to see Asian massage parlors. Can you think about some sketchy little Asian massage parlors in the community that you may think about? All you have to do is Google their phone number, Google their address, sit in the parking lot a little bit, just see only men coming in and out. And then there's a whole other conversation about those women who are brought here from other countries, specifically Asia, who don't speak the language, whose documents are taken away, who are held for incredible debt bondage that they'll never be able to pay off, and they're forced to do these massages and all these other commercial sex acts and not keep a cent of that money. And they're abused and all the things that you can think of. That's a whole other conversation. And we can have information for you. If you see something, you say something by putting in a tip to the National Human Trafficking Hotline number. And I can give you that number after. And so back then, it was all American brothels, massage parlors. And so I have a duffel bag full of condoms, baby wipes, high heel stilettos, skimpy dress. My friend teaches me how to hustle, how to do the least amount of work to make the most amount of money. And I get dropped off in Connecticut, right in the busy finance district of Hartford. There's a bouncer downstairs. He buzzes me up. I come in. There's the owner. What happens first? My name gets changed, right? And so you have to understand at the core of this is identity disturbance. I have to be somebody else. So, okay, my name gets changed. I'm in this lounge area, all women, all with traffickers, probably 16 to 60-year-olds. It's dark, it's musty. It's really small, there's no windows, everything's kind of sticky and grimy. Everything is like the chairs are grimy. And the men come in and they pay a door fee, and then they come in the lounge and they get to scan the room and hand a ticket to whoever they want. And they go back in the locker room where they're supposed to shower and change, and then you meet them in the back and there's a whole hallway with like 8 or 9 rooms, and there's a mattress and a nightstand in the room. And I'll tell you, my first time exchanging myself was that day. He was a regular, came every Friday, and he wanted the newest girl. There was always going to be a newer girl on a Friday. I was completely horrified. I was so disgusted and so traumatized that my body naturally shut off. They call it disassociation. I did not know this was a thing. I was completely sober, and I had to exchange myself with this man who could have been my grandfather, right? I remember his name, the shirt color, what he looked like. I remember these details, but after that, nothing. Completely shut off. I was so horrified and disgusted that my body just naturally shut off. And that's the thing, is that you have to act like this is fun, this is exciting, this is great, because you're trying to make money in this situation. So who's really the one in control? The buyer, right? Because they have the money, they have the power, and if you don't do what they're requesting, then you're not going to make the money, or they're going to beat you or do something horrific. Now, in these controlled environments like a massage parlor, violence is less happening because there's a lady at the front door, there's a bouncer downstairs, and so they try to keep it on the low. But when you're when you're being exploited on the street, and you're going in and out of cars and alleyways and all these things, those women get dumped on the sides of roads constantly. Do you remember the Craigslist killer so many years ago when Craigslist became popular? Exactly. Women in the sex trade get murdered all day long, and no one cares about them. They're kind of tossed to the side because they're just prostitutes. But that's somebody's daughter, right? It's important to recognize that. And it's inherently violent. And so I was so disgusted and ashamed, I shut off, and I came back when it was over, and he hands me the money, and I'm like, ooh, look how much money he made. Okay, I'm just trying to focus on the money. And after being there from 10 a.m. to 1 a.m., a few days in a row, and I had to sleep at a little nasty motel next door, doing this over and over and over and over again for those days. He picks me up, my trafficker picks me up, we come back home to Boston. He lived in Cambridge. It was another red flag. He lived with his mother. If you're such a drug dealer, hustler, why have you still live with your mother, right? No, I totally didn't even, painted right over the red flags. And he puts out his hand, and I knew that gesture meant to hand over all the money. But in my mind, I sat logically thinking, why would I give you all the money? Wait a second, you weren't even there. You're my boyfriend, you're my pimp. I thought you loved me. This is disgusting. I'm having sex with strangers. I don't even really want to do this. And he's like, is there going to be a problem? And I say, no, and I hand it over. And at that moment, as I reflect, I think, wow, that's when I lost my voice, I lost my courage, I was full of shame. And I go right back home to my parents' house, and I go back to college, I go back to working at the hair salon, and now I'm living a double life. Every few days I disappear and get sent to Connecticut. And I don't want to make you think that you have to cross state lines to be trafficked. You don't. You could be trafficked right out of your own home. You don't have to go anywhere. It's when someone is gaining money or things of value for your exploitation, right? That's what trafficking means, essentially. And so after a few weeks of this, months, whatever it was, I started to change my mind. I can't stand it. I can't look my parents in the eyes. I'm living this double life. I'm lying to my friends. And I started to speak up and I say, I don't want to do this anymore. And that's when he uses violence as a way to keep me under his control. Okay, so you guys all know about domestic violence and how power and control is at the center of that. And they use all these methods to keep you under their thumb. So we're driving home from Connecticut. It's probably 2, 3 in the morning. I'm driving. I say something he doesn't like. It was a term called out of pocket. I was known to be out of pocket continuously. And I'd say something, he backhands me so hard, this side of my head hits the glass. My vision becomes blurry. I can't see. I didn't know that seeing stars was a thing. I pull over and he proceeds to pull me out of the car and beat me on the side of the highway. And then he threw me in the back seat because there was another pimp and a girl in the back, and they got him off of me. They threw me in the back seat, and that's when I cried the whole way home. And I was like, oh no, what did I get myself into? Right? Because when someone starts putting their hands on you, everything changes. I wasn't raised in a home with any type of domestic violence. My dad doesn't even swear or yell, anything like that. And so I had experienced stuff, again, on my mother's side of some violence and things like that, but never intimately like that. And so now I'm trapped. And before I know it, I'm completely isolated. I'm living with him. I'm considered the bottom, meaning I have to cook, clean, do the laundry, go food shopping, do everything he tells me to do. Everything is controlled. Every time I'd prostitute, I'd have to come home, put the money in a certain place. And then he would sit me down for hours on end. You're no good, you're dirty, you're a prostitute. No one's ever going to love you. And those lies became cemented and became reality because my experience in the trade told me the same thing. I'm no good, I'm dirty, no one's ever going to love me. And then he would pull in other women that would become my wife-in-law. He'd meet them at nightclubs and parties and strip clubs, wherever he could find more vulnerable women, he'd pull them in. And then he'd pit us against each other. He'd beat us in front of each other, all these types of mental, insane roller coaster things to keep us always on our toes, never understanding what was going to happen, and always on edge. And so during this time, I had completely unhealthy coping skills, right? I just had all types of ways that I was trying to cope with this type of trauma because I was not using substances. So I developed eating disorders. I worked out like a maniac. I had OCD-like habits. My body was physically reacting. I had a lump in my throat that would never go away. I didn't know what it was. I called it agita, right? I had heartburn. That's what I thought because my body was physically under so much stress. I washed my body constantly because I felt so disgusting. So trying to wash that feeling of disgust off of me. Nothing made me feel better. I went to my primary care doctor constantly. As I look back in my records, I was there at least 2 to 3 times a month, self-diagnosing myself with all types of issues. ADD, ADHD, depression, anxiety, and he would just give me meds. And thank goodness I never got addicted to anything because that would have made my life so much more difficult. I had eating disorders. Like I said, I was really thin. I had bruising. I had head damage, all types of things my doctor would see. And he tagged me as domestic violence victim because it wasn't a term for sex trafficking then. And I remember seeing the domestic violence lady one time, and she showed me the domestic violence wheel, and she talked to me and basically said, you don't have to accept this behavior. And I was like, I don't, right? And that's the thing, is that you're so manipulated and coerced, and again, it's in the mind, that service providers that you may meet along the way, or maybe even just a good Samaritan can just plant seeds of hope along the journey. That's all it is. That is all we're called to do. We can't rescue women out of this lifestyle necessarily, but we can plant seeds of hope and just be available when and if they're ever ready to exit. It's a very tricky thing. And so I was with my trafficker for 5 years. He would then move me from Connecticut up to another massage parlor in Kittery, Maine that was pretty infamous in Kittery. It was called the Danish Health Club. You could Google it. It was there for 20, 30 years. And I tried to escape from my trafficker. I want to let you know many, many times. And every time I would run away to my parents' house, because I had parents, a lot of women don't, he would come there and badger me, manipulate me, cry, show up with gifts, diamonds, right? And promise he wouldn't hit me anymore, things would change. It's like domestic violence on steroids, right? And I'd go back, and I'd leave, I'd go back plenty of times. One time I ran away from him in the middle of an argument, and I ran to the corner store. We lived in Everett, and I ran to the corner store, and I was hiding from him, and I was hiding behind a stack of newspapers, and I'm waiting, and I see him drive by. I feel relieved, but then I look down, I have no shoes on. I have no phone, I have no money, and there was no good Samaritan, no one there trying to help me, and I wasn't gonna go to the police and say, help me, right? Because I'm the prostitute, I'm the one that's gonna be arrested for the crime, and they make sure they drill into your mind that you're the criminal, not them, and that if you tell on them, you're a rat, right? So you feel like you have no options. And so I just go back, and then he beats me even worse for having to run away and him come look for me. Okay, so then you actually can learn helplessness, because it just begins like, this is not going to get better, and this is what it is. So you end up settling and just trying to survive. And so up in Maine, it was more high class. It was like a real 9 to 5. You went there from 9, it closed early. And to give you an idea, all the women there had traffickers. It was a notorious family, pimp family, who's still trafficking women to this day. The Jones family, pretty infamous from North Revere. Plenty of their victims up there in Maine. And then you had our side, who were pimps from Boston. And there were girls as young as 13 being trafficked, but I didn't recognize how young she was because I was trying to survive my own life. And then there was women that actually, one woman was a school teacher by day. She worked in Lynn Public Schools. I think she was a special need teacher. And she would come up after school and prostitute for her trafficker. So again, it does not look like a certain stereotype that we may think in our minds. They are regular people in our communities. Also, I went to Bunker Hill Community College while being trafficked. My trafficker was making so much money off of me and the other woman that he was exploiting, he wanted to open up a business as a front. And he talked me into going to college to get a business degree. So I literally went to college for 2 years while being trafficked, made the dean's list, paid for all my classes with cash, and did really well. Made no friends except for one guy who wanted to marry me for citizenship. And I was like, dude, that's not enough money and you're gonna get us killed. Forget it. Can we not be friends? I don't even remember, from like an Eastern or European country. And so again, in college, right, being trafficked in my early 20s, driving a Mercedes-Benz, no idea. And so during this time of being in Maine, this young girl that was there, again, I knew she was young. I didn't know how young. The owner of that club died. There was a lot of money laundering issues. The way you actually were able to prostitute there, you had to go to real massage therapy school at a place they had a partnership with. It's somewhere in New Hampshire. And all the girls went to this one place. We were taught massage techniques. And at the end of how many weeks, we got a certificate that was in a sealed envelope. We took that with a lot of cash to the lawyer. And then he apparently paid off the police chief, and that's how it stayed open. And there was also a retired cop who worked at the desk, and his wife was a prostitute in the back, right? So you never know. There's always sometimes a few bad apples in the bunch, right? And so that's why that place was open for so long. But once the owner died, money laundering issues happened and everything else. I'm sure there was like organized crime involved, et cetera. I just don't know those details. The young girl had an aunt who was looking for her, the 13-year-old. Now again, if the average age into the trade is between 12 and 14, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, I believe, quoted a few years ago that over 300,000 kids go missing each year in the US. And about 100,000 of those kids fall through the cracks and end up in the trade. And so the reason why they don't get found and recovered is because no one's looking for them, right? The system is too big and too broken and overloaded, and their families of origin aren't well, and so no one's looking for them. But this young girl's aunt kept calling the DCF worker and trying to be her own investigator and figure things out, and she put a tip in, and the feds got involved. Because when there's a minor involved, it's a lot easier to prosecute those cases, right? And so the place got busted. And I knew there was going to be a bust. I just had a sense, God's grace on my life. I didn't have a relationship with God by any means, but like something in there told me, you gotta go. And the only reason why my trafficker let me leave was because Craigslist became popular and the internet was like a thing. So now he's posting ads of me all over the internet, different websites. Craigslist, you can buy a refrigerator and a human on the same site. Right now I'm going again in and out of people's homes, businesses all over New England. He even sent me to Nevada where prostitution is legal in some counties, which again, there's a big push, pay attention, there's a big push, especially through New England, to legalize prostitution. Do not fall for it. Do not fall for it. People get trafficked through the legal system all day, every day. And then when they want to prosecute their trafficker or the buyer, they can't because it will be illegal. Does that make any sense? So even through the legal system, people are exploited. Down to Florida where there was high-priced escorting and all these fancy things and strip clubs and stuff, you name it, been there, done that, all around. Finally, almost about 5 years in, again, online, experiencing a lot of violence from sex buyers, just horrific things in the trade that I experienced not being under the safety of a brothel, right? I get pregnant by my trafficker, and this was not his deal. He did not want me to keep this baby. And a lot of traffickers do impregnate their women on purpose to keep more control, but he was forcing me to terminate the pregnancy. And I was so devastated because I thought I could retire, I could have the baby, the family, the business, everything you promised. Look, I have the degree, you can open a business. But no, he was forcing me and forcing me. And that's another lie that we're sold, that abortion doesn't give you trauma. It sure does. And I went and I did that, and I was completely horrified and traumatized and said, you know what, I gotta go. You can use and abuse me all these years, but to make me take a life was like way more than I could handle. So I started saving money without him noticing because I needed my great escape. I needed a plan. When I started saving money, I'd take a few hundred off the top each time and put it in Ziploc bags and tie elastics around it and put it in the dirt in my big potted plants. And I wanted to save a few $1,000s so I can get my own apartment. Because every time I went to my parents' house, he'd come, right? So I was trying to make a statement. Now, how does a woman who's been in the commercial sex trade walk into a real estate office? I can't. I have no job, I have no reference. I have an incredible amount of debt in my name. Never mind, again, those women with substance use issues, mental health, children, criminal records, etc. The door gets that much further away because that's what it's designed to do. But God's grace, again, on my life, I meet a sex buyer off Craigslist. I go to his house. He doesn't want anything from me. He just pays me a lot of money. And he keeps calling me back week after week. And I start to have this relationship with him because somewhere in my mind, he's considered safe, right? Because nothing's happening. And years later, as I realized, prostitution research says when a woman's ready to leave the trade, she needs one safe, supportive person to reach out to because she's so isolated, right? And so this guy becomes my safe person. We hang out. He lives in Chelsea. He's from East Boston. He's Italian. We watch SpongeBob and have a great time. Okay, literally, that's what was happening. And he happens to own a corner store. And so I reach out to him and say, hey, can you lie and make me fake pay stubs? I'm in a bad situation. I need to get my own apartment. Can you lie and say that I work for you? Sure, I'll do that. And he says I'm the bookkeeper. Hilarious, because I can't do math for the life of me. And so I'm the bookkeeper. I get the apartment. I give them all my money, my application, and I get the apartment. Now it's time to leave. Do you think my trafficker is going to help me pack and give me all the leather and the granite and the jewelry and the pocketbooks and all that? No. I'm leaving with nothing. And that is another reason why people stay so long and trapped in these situations, because you're walking away from all that with nothing. So you did all that all those years and it's zip. You're getting nothing. It's really hard to walk away from. And I left with 2 trash bags. My cat and my dog, because they were mine, he didn't want them. And I called the local police and I said, hey, my boyfriend's gonna get mad. Can you hang on the porch so I can move? Cop stood here, my pimp stood there, and I leave. Plenty of red flags. Cop coulda came in the house, looked around, saw that we were obviously, again, in our 20s, stereotypical, right? He's black, I'm white. There's other women living there, there's rooms. There's plenty of red flags that something was going on. Okay, nothing. I get to my big empty apartment, he doesn't follow me, he doesn't give me domestic violence resources, nothing. I get there, it's big, empty, I'm suicidal, I'm hopeless, I have no idea how I'm gonna put my life together. And I call my mom, and again, don't have the courage to look her in the eye and tell her really what's going on with me. But I just say, Mom, I need help, right? So she comes, helps me put it together, buys me some furniture. I told her he made me do things I really didn't want to do. And I mean, she had seen the black eyes and the in and out and all those things. She knew I was in a bad situation, but she didn't know what to say. but she showed up when I called, and so I give her credit for that. And so a few weeks go by, and what do you think I do? Call him back, right? Because of Stockholm Syndrome, where victims feel intense emotional bonds to their abuser. This is all part of trauma. Also, there's rules to this life. If I prostitute on my own, I'm a renegade, and if he catches me, he'll kill me. Or I get chosen or purchased by another pimp, and I don't know how much more violent he's going to be than this guy, so let me stick to what I know. I'll live here, you live there with all those women, I'll give you a cut of the money, and we'll call it a day. My genius plan doesn't work, more time goes by, and he breaks into my apartment, glass, blood, typical fight. But by this time, I had the courage to call 911, and he was arrested for domestic violence charges, which helped me get a restraining order, and that made him leave me alone, because I was causing too much heat, too much drama. So great. Now I go to work as a secretary, 9 to 5. I'm falling asleep at the desk. I can't talk to regular people, men especially. The end of the month comes. I can't pay my bills. I'm like a fish out of water, right? I have no idea how to do this. Can you imagine living, trying to plop me into normal society after living that way for 5 years? And I start hanging out with all new friends, and they're coming over my big empty apartment, and enter in OxyContin. And I was like, I ain't going to therapy. This is a lot better. Because no one wakes up dreaming to become a prostitute or a drug addict. But you know what happens? We just want the pain to go away. Can someone please take the pain away? Because something's happened along the way. And unfortunately, drugs promise to take that pain away, but it makes your life completely out of control, which I had no idea. So, pushes me right back into prostitution, not with a pimp, with a growing drug habit. Life would unwind. I'd be completely homeless, sleeping on park benches, more trauma, more abuse, IV heroin addict, you name it. I've been there, stealing from my beloved grandparents, really turned into someone I could never have imagined. My brother dies in 2006 from an overdose. Like I said, he was abused as a kid. We lived very parallel lives. He became a male prostitute himself. I don't think he was ever trafficked. I just think it became part of his homosexual lifestyle. Party, drugs, MDMA, GHB, all the party drugs, ecstasy, etc. And he contracted HIV somewhere in there. And by the time he was 36, his body was just tired, and he passed away. And so that led me to think and look at myself and say, I gotta get clean, I gotta get off the streets, I'm gonna die, my parents are gonna have no kids, and that's just sad. And the most compassionate people I ever met out there on the streets were the EMT workers. Every time I'd overdose, they'd come and Narcan me. I'd wake up from this overdose, and they'd look me in the eyes and say, what are you doing here? Or like, go home. And I think to myself, what am I doing here? How do I go home? It's been almost a decade. I don't know how to do this. And so then I thought of treatment. I thought of going into treatment centers to get clean and sober. I would do the spin dry, right? I just go in a detox. And I remember one detox I was in, and the counselor said, what do you want to go to the Sinatra house and do it your way? And I was like, yeah, is that a place? I totally didn't catch the joke, and he started singing the Frank Sinatra song to me. I was like, okay. I want to run the show. Because the biggest barrier to recovery is your unwillingness to surrender. That is the hardest part, to surrender, especially to a God whom you do not understand, right? To the higher power that we're trying to figure out things. And so finally, in 2007, I got clean, sober, I got off the streets. So I think this year will be 18 years or something. Clean, sober, off the streets. Yeah, clap, thank you. Because that is a long time, and I could probably write a whole other book on my recovery and what it's been like. But somewhere in there early on, AA, NA meetings, trying to figure out the 12 steps, always in substance abuse counseling, treatment. And it was a woman who took me to church, and she introduced me to Jesus in the backseat of her car. Very appropriate, because I felt like I could not approach God. I was dirty, I was disgusting, prostitute, no one would love me. And I met Jesus in the backseat, and he loved me in my dirt and shame. And I went on this journey through a spiritual lens. Attended a small church here in Saugus. If anyone remembers Grace Ministries, it was right there on Main Street. And it was there that I got well. And guess what? The men were appropriate. No one wanted anything from me. There was no transactions. There was no strings attached. The women there loved me unconditionally, took me right under their wing, invited me over for holidays. No one looked at me any different. I got my Massachusetts real estate license. I started renting apartments for a living, try to put my life together. I failed the test like 3 times, but this lady was so gracious. She kept paying for me. You'll pass this time. All right, maybe this time, Jazz, study a little harder. You're gonna do it. So finally I did it, right? And another lady rented me a small basement apartment. And when I was late on the rent, she didn't kick me out. She didn't want anything else from me. She said, pay when you can, it's okay. Right? So I built my life back very organically, made tons of mistakes, and then I got married. And I always joke and say, if you want all your trauma to come out, get married. And that's exactly what happened. I did not know that I was a survivor. I stuffed the prostitution piece, because who's going to be in church in a little ladies group meeting or Bible study and say, I was a prostitute? Like, nope, we're not generally going to do that. And so again, we stuffed those things. And it was through this series of separating from my husband, having children, all this stuff. It's in the book. I'm pretty sure I've added that in there. The healing came. And someone told me that I was a survivor of trafficking. And that's what everything changed. Because now I was no longer a victim, but I was a survivor. And I just felt this desire to go back out onto the streets and tell the women, if I can get well and get off the streets, maybe so can you. And that's where the Bags of Hope came in, right? Those bags, thank you so much for everyone who donated to DAR for filling those bags and being a part of that, because that's how it started. In the back of my minivan with my kids, I'd go to the store, I'd fill these bags, write a little note, go to Lynn, jump out of my car, and tell women, hey, here's a bag, there's a better way. If I can get off the street, so can you. And then people started to be like, what's the name of your organization? What's the name of your ministry? And I was like, I have no idea. I'm not doing this to be professional. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to name it something. Bags of Hope. It's just a bag of hope. And that was it. Then I started speaking all over New England, getting asked to share my story. There was a church that I belonged to where I first shared my story. And who wants to admit their life, again, in front of a bunch of strangers? But every time I did, women would come up to me with tears streaming down their face. I have the same story, but I'm too ashamed to talk about it. Women in the church, women, professional, like so many women. And I just kept sharing because I felt like, okay, I just need to keep going. And then I started running groups and halfway houses and treatment centers. So those women in addiction would stop going in those cycles of exploitation, addiction, and homelessness. And I started running groups there, started giving out the bags. Anita came and joined me about a couple of years later. She was really strong administratively and helped me get all those bags out. So today, she's been with me, I think, 10 years. We give out over 1,000 bags each year because people in the community donate those items. And just a few years ago, we were able to open up our own home for the women that are exiting that life in New Hampshire. So yeah, amen to that too. So for many years, what we would do would send the women to other states. We would pay for the bus ride, airfare, whatever it was. We'd send women out of state to go to these safe homes across the country. But there was a couple who purchased a Catholic retreat center when it went on the market. The nuns retired. And it's 17 bedrooms on 15 acres. And this couple purchased it with the hope to partner with a ministry to do work for women and or children. And so they picked me. And I thought like confetti was going to fall. I was on Zoom. I was waiting for confetti. I was waiting for Publishers Clearinghouse to bust in my front door with a giant check. Right? Nothing like that had happened. This is a complete faith walk to raise all that money, $300,000 to $400,000 a year, to raise the money to do this work. We are all private donations. There's no government, no state funding, nothing like that. And we have to have staff to work there. We can house up to 6, 7 women in a time because I don't have enough staff to take more women than that. We can take babies. We've had a woman just have a baby a few weeks ago. And a really amazing story is just to show you the power of this ministry and how we've been just doing the work as faithful as we can. There was a woman who I met at a halfway house many years ago, probably 7, 8 years ago. She was in the halfway house in Lynn, getting off the streets, getting clean and sober. She was in my group. She got a bag of hope, and we've walked alongside her for a long time. And she became a Christian, and we were praying for her sister who was still on the street, who's been on the street for decades. And we were praying for her sister to get well and to get off the streets. And don't you know, finally, this past year, the sister had a baby in October. She had been being exploited. She was on drugs. She had the baby. DCF got involved, and she called Anita and said, I want to come into the home. And so now that sister is in our residential program, getting well. And then her sister is on the other side of the outreach, and she does all of our social media and marketing and stuff like that. Like, it's just so amazing. I could tell you stories for days, but I've already taken probably 45 minutes of your time, hopefully educating you, making you aware of what this is. I want to leave you with hope. I want to let you know we do recover, right? We do get well. You never know who you're going to meet, where you're going to meet them. Get my book. It's really, it's impactful because it's all written from my diaries. By the whole time I was being trafficked, I managed to keep my journal And it's not the horrific details of what happens in the sex trade, it's the mental and emotional stuff that I was going through. And even through active addiction, somehow I managed to keep all these journals. And then years ago, I was just led to take all those journals and start blogging. And I blog exactly what was written, and I put present day reflections to show who I am today and how we recover and how you can support somebody in that process. And so it's out there, it's $15 or $25 if you want to donate, because we give them away all the time to women that we meet in treatment and jails. Anita runs the groups now. She goes into jails and halfway houses. Again, we give out those bags. We walk alongside these women on the outreach, and then we take them into the home where they can stay up to 2 years as they work on their healing and their recovery and just get well. Also, they're making a lot of products. So if you see that table, there's soaps and bags and some handmade stuff that the women are making, because we're empowering them to actually learn business skills and soft skills so they don't have to return to that life, but that they can be empowered and make better choices, open businesses, go back to school, whatever it is they want to do. No strings attached. Just come, stay, rest, get well. And then we're honored to walk alongside of them. So I don't know if we have time for questions, or, okay, we do. I don't know if you want to ask any questions. That was a lot of information, but I thank you for your time. And yes, in the back.
It's very scary, and being a parent nowadays is just, nobody talks about any of this stuff, and everybody really should get real, because when you come home with a baby, the world gets scary, and you don't know what to do. And so when you said to me, like, what would trigger girls to go into like weird lifestyles, is when you're the parent that's strict, right? You're not the fun parent, you're the strict parent. But then that can lead your kids into different directions. So I guess my thing to you is, how can we start talking to these girls and getting them to understand girl code and like looking at the red flags? Because I hate to say it, but with these phones, they just look at you and they're like, it's no big deal. Like, nothing's ever a big deal. And so my daughter's going to be going away to college, and I'm scared crap for her. Because it's like, is she going to know when a guy is, like, she just doesn't know any of this stuff, and I can't be there with her, but it's a whole different world now. And I thank you for bringing this up.
Yeah, thank you for that. It's true. So I have 3 daughters, 2 sons. They range from 21 to 7. And yeah, I'm the Karen. I'm not the fun parent. Nope, you ain't wearing that. That's too tight. That's too short. You're not going on here. Nope, you got this protection on your phone. Hand that over. Bah, bah, bah. All the things. I'm probably over the top because of my experience, right? I don't care. That's fine. I have conversations. You know what, though? My kids are educated. And that's the key. We can't depend on the school system to educate them about this situation. Fine. As parents, we have that responsibility. There are really good documentaries. There are really good books written by survivors, things that these kids can learn, even shorts, YouTube videos, whatever it is, education on sex trafficking. There are trainings. There's a really great resource called the Cool Aunt series, where this survivor has created this online platform to work with teens and educate them, and she's the cool aunt, right? And so she'll have a conversation, she shows this video, and there's teens in the video, and then they have to answer a true or false or whatever type of questions. It's about education. It's about teaching them this, because you're right, the college campus is one of probably the most dangerous places for a young girl. Even back years ago at UNH, on their campus, there were flyers for sugar babies. Sugar daddies, right, older men with money, looking for these young college girls to be their companions. Okay, we know nothing's for free. Sooner or later, he might take you to dinner a few times, but he's gonna want something else in return. You're a broke college student, you can't buy much, so this promise and this lure is going to draw you right in. Never mind, there's websites for it, right? There's all types of websites for these things. And again, apps right in the back pocket. And again, these predators, oh my gosh, Snapchat. How, you know, and men and boys send inappropriate images to these young girls, young. So it does. It starts in the home. We have to educate. We have to make aware through movies, through conversation, because you can't put them in bubble wrap. I'd love to, but we can't. So we have to educate, make them aware, so then hopefully they can notice the signs and make good choices. It's so hard, yeah. Any other questions? Yeah?
It's not a question, I just wanted,
again, obviously, I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you so much for coming. And I am a Saugus school committee member. I've been pushing for these talks to be brought into the schools. So I'm going to push even more, but I think there's a lot of resistance from parents. I do. I mean, a lot of people don't hear from me because I say it how it is, but this is how it is. Mm-hmm. So when I was on my way here today, my son would kill me, but his none was right there. I asked him, what's sex trafficking? What his response was, it was probably something in driver's ed, but I really don't even know. I probably missed it. That's what he said to me. He's a sophomore in high school. Yeah. I had to explain to him what certain sexual positions were that he heard in the schoolyard a couple of times. That he heard, and so I'm trying to, if 3 girls in the audience, right, could listen to what you, 3 girls tell another 3 girls, another 3 girls tell, and it's just the world we live in now. Mm-hmm. It is the world we live in now. I know we don't want to face it, we don't want to admit it, but it's drugs, it's prostitution, it's everything. So thank you so much for coming today and explaining your story, because I'm sure that reliving your story isn't always easy. But I am going to work on getting you into the schools, so I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I spoke at a couple, was it Lynn English or Lynn Classical, like 1,600 kids in a big auditorium. It was just amazing. And they actually did a whole Bags of Hope drive. I've spoken in private schools, have invited us to come in, and it's always tailored in a way that's, you know, for the audience, to be appropriate and to catch them, because you have to touch people's hearts, right? Because this is what the issue is, and to educate, to reach these young girls, still they're like, that's not going to happen to me. Well, you know, when I'm in a school and I ask middle schoolers, does anyone know or have an OnlyFans? They were actually brave enough to admit in 6th grade, 6th and 7th graders, that they had OnlyFans or knew someone that did. So absolutely, it's happening. And give the parents an option, if there's an assembly, for their kid to opt out. If they don't want to expose them to it, fine, right? But to definitely offer it as an opportunity. And then you think about the parents who are exploiting their kids that are in the schools. Again, that's happening. There are kids that are experiencing this themselves through a cousin, an uncle, a parent. Yeah. Yeah.
Are you aware of a movement at all? My grandchildren live out of state, where parents have bonded together about no cell phones until you over 8th grade and no social media until you're 16. Is that something that's happening around here too?
I don't know. It's probably not popular. But I'm sure there are small sects who do that, yeah. Yeah.
This is like more of a statement than a question, I guess, but like, you're so right about like the phone stuff. Like, I got my first phone in 4th grade, and I have a Snapchat account, and I was first in 5th grade when like some random Indian man added me and told me if I sent him these pictures, he would like wire me money.
Yeah.
I was smart enough, I'm like, I don't have a credit card. Like, what do you mean wire me money? I'm 10. Like, I added him. But like, it really does happen. And I guess people are too, like, people my age, I guess I'm a junior at the school, but they're too desensitized to like, oh, like the creepy men just like add me and like do whatever. Like, that's like not normal. Like, I don't know, so many of my friends, like, they're like, just, they're so like desensitized to it. Like, they think it's normal. They're just like, oh, okay, the creepy guys are adding me, like, whatever. Or, like,
and they send these inappropriate pitches to them, right? And it just adds to the desensitization. How about these young kids that get in these conversations with these people and they send nudes, and then that person says, I got your nudes, now I'm going to send it to your whole school unless you do X, Y, or Z. Kids have committed suicide because of that.
one of my friends, actually, they tried to blackmail her by taking a regular picture off her Instagram and editing it.
Yep.
To make it look like a new picture.
Exactly. Deep fake, AI, porn, all that. Yes. And that's why I do not post pictures of my kids on the internet, right? I know way too much. Exactly. Yep. Yeah.
If you know someone, thank you again for sharing your story, and I loved your book, and I sent it to a few people as well. If you know someone who is stuck in this horrific position that you were in, how do you help them?
Yeah, how do you help them? It's just really by being available, giving hope, non-judgmental as possible, loving, supporting. And again, you're going to want to rescue, you're going to want to shake them. Like, get out, just leave. And it's just not that easy. So it's that steady, calm presence to be supportive, and boundaries. And be safe, and be wise. Call us, give her my phone number, give her a book, whatever it is. We're available. We answer the phone past 5 o'clock. We walk alongside these women, no matter what. And I wanted to give the National Human Trafficking Hotline number too, because if you see something sketchy in your area, you definitely shouldn't approach the person, right? Or maybe you're on a vacation and you see something sketchy in the hotel. You see someone who looks like this shouldn't be this situation, or you see one of those sketchy massage parlors and only men are coming in and out, whatever. The National Human Trafficking Hotline, you can Google. Oh my gosh, it's supposed to be burned in my brain, but I don't want to give you the number wrong. It's like an 888 number. So you can Google it, you can put it in your phone, and you can put in a tip, anonymously or not. And the more tips they get on specific locations, like, if there's 10 tips, finally, they'll alert local police and the, Homeland Security maybe, and they can do these stings and these operations, even though it's very difficult. Because a lot of these Asian massage parlors pop up in other places. They kind of go like around New England all the way to New York and just keep popping up. But at least you did something, right? If you see something, say something. There's another great resource, Rescue America. And Rescue America works with survivors too as they're trying to exit. We actually had an ambassador, we were an outreach huddle at my church where we would actually, through Rescue America, through their system, call women who are posting ads on these websites and ask them if they want to get out. And we'd have conversations with them. And we say, hey, I'm volunteering for Rescue America. There's a better way. You don't have to sell yourself. Do you want resources? Do you want to get help? And a lot of those women would call back the hotline number and actually exit. And then they partner with safe homes across the country and then help send the women to these places, which was really empowering in a way you could help and volunteer. There's also, for men, men have a voice in this, right? I'm not a man hater by any means, no shame, condemnation, right? Any guy in the room who's ever been involved in the commercial sex trade, right? But men have a way too. So there was this group of guys, and they, through the EPIC project, and they would interrupt demand by posting ads on the websites, and then when the buyers would call, they'd pick up the phone and say, hey, do you know what's unsafe and why it's unhealthy for men to purchase sex? And most of these women are victims in the commercial sex trade, and they'd have conversations with the men. A lot of them hang up, but some of them have conversations, right? And again, it's going after the heart. It's a heart change. Because there's a lot of programs when men get involved and get arrested for purchasing sex, they want to shame them, right? They want to put their name in the paper or like on a billboard and shame them. But really, that just drives them deeper underground to try to deal with their addiction. For me, you got to work on the heart, and you got to get well, and you got to stop that sexual addiction. So you got to reach them there and give them support and services for that sexual addiction. Yeah.
So I'm curious, in the bigger picture that you just mentioned, with men getting arrested, there was a big thing in Boston in the last year and a half. The names never came out, and it still comes out periodically as a one-liner in the news. But what happens on the bigger picture? Does that ever get brought to people's attention and anything get done with it?
So, I mean, on a big scale, if there's big lawyers, doctors, people with money, right, it's going to be harder to shame them, right? And then a lot of people, judges, people are in on it too. Again, Homeland Security, law enforcement, they've come a long way in helping victims and actually taking down this issue. But unfortunately, money and power still has its way. You think about Robert Kraft, remember that story? And just recently I heard he was trying to partner with My Life, My Choice in Boston, which is an anti-trafficking agency. They mentor at-risk youth and people who have been exploited. He's trying to put money in there and partner with them. Right? Guilty, right.
So you talk about your church. I'd love to know what it is and how do you get a church involved?
you just go and tell them they need to be involved. And you be that lady that just keeps saying, hey, we need to do this. We need to have this conversation, and you just show my information. You can YouTube my name, videos, I'm legit, right? Been doing this for a long time. I don't have any brochures with me today because we're all out and I didn't get any more. But just really show them the statistics and the information and the videos of how really important it is. And we would love to come in and have a whole conversation, an event. Bags of Hope is a good way because it's an action step. People like to donate and bring the items and fill the bags together. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you again. Thank you very much.
I do want to present from the Parson Roby chapter, Daughters of the American Revolution, to Jasmine Grace, our Community Service Award for all her wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
And also a donation from the Parson Roby.
Thank you very much. Thank you.